Well, thank you for joining us today. This is the 7th annual UAS Tech Forum. So if this is what you're here for today, you're in the right place. You made it, so we appreciate that. This is also our first ever actual event. So we're excited to share this with you and take you on this journey. So as you're joining, we've got people joining in here. I'd love to know if you could put in the chat box if this is your first virtual event. And if this is your first virtual event, whether it's your first virtual event or you've been attending many in the last several months, I'd love to hear, you know, what's your favorite thing about virtual events? So we'd love to, okay, so we've got a first ever. That's great. So as we get started here, we're going to continue. We're just going to take a couple minutes, let people join in. I want to welcome everybody again to the 7th annual UAS Tech Forum, and I'll tell you a little bit about the origins of the Tech Forum as we all get settled here. So the UAS Tech Forum is a program by the Small Business Administration in Washington, D.C., and we have, it's called the Regional Cluster Initiative. And the UAS cluster is one of a handful of clusters around the country that each has a geographic focus and an industry focus. And our focus is UAS, and our industry focus is UAS is our industry focus, and our geographic focus is Oklahoma and Kansas. So we want to take this moment to have an extra special thank you to Oklahoma City, our host city. We were intended to be an in-person event, and the world had other things in mind. So I want to just make sure that we thank our host city of Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, our host state, Oklahoma State. Throughout the event, we will be showcasing a number of Oklahoma companies and companies who have recently relocated to Oklahoma to start business. Also some folks in Kansas, and also the number of partners that we have to make this event possible. So I want to give a big thank you to all of our sponsors and all of those throughout the state of Oklahoma and beyond in Kansas, and many of our partners who have made not only this Tech Forum happen, but all of our Tech Forums happen. Their generous sponsorship is what makes these events possible. So I urge you throughout the day to please go visit their booths, go visit the exhibit hall, drop in their booths, say hello, and you know, please just give them your thanks and learn more about what they're doing related to UAS. So all of our sponsors and participants, they're all here today because they're involved in the UAS industry and its growth and different cross sections of that. And so again, throughout the 2 days, we have a number of speakers, both nationally and globally recognized speakers, along with some of really the champions and the innovators in Oklahoma and Kansas who are really pushing this industry forward. So I want to thank everybody for that. Just a few things before we get started. If this is your first ever virtual event, or you're new to attending virtual events, which many of us are, what I will remind you is that we do have a chat box. So if you have questions for any of our speakers this morning, please enter them into the chat box. We're going to have a wonderful Q&A with Wynne with AUVSI coming up a little bit later. So please, type in your questions in the chat box if you have any, and we just would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear, again, if this is your first virtual event or if you've been attending virtual events, what is your favorite part of being virtual? We just had a conversation earlier. Many of us have not traveled in about 6 months, which is highly unusual. So there may be some of you out there that's your favorite thing, is you didn't have to travel. Or maybe you miss travel, which I know I've spoken to some people who also miss travel. So we have a very packed agenda tonight, or today, and really over the next 2 days, and we have some wonderful speakers. So we really want to just give a big thank you to our speakers who have graciously been available and offered their time to participate in the UAS Tech Forum. So again, to make the most of your participation, I encourage you to participate in the chat, schedule one-on-one meetings. So all of our speakers that you're going to listen to over the next 2 days, they're all available for one-on-one meetings. You can go visit their attendee profile and make that request. So there's tons of ways to continue networking and to make sure that you are getting those strategic connections. And the reason why we're all gathering here today, as we want to remain connected and continue to have the ability to do our work and connect with individuals and keep that going. So with that, I want to go ahead and get started. We've got a packed morning. And so first, I'd like to please welcome, we have a wonderful address from Governor Kevin Stitt, the governor of the state of Oklahoma. He has generously provided a welcome for us. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and play a welcome message from Governor Kevin Stitt.
Good morning, Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt here. Welcome to the 2020 UAS Tech Forum. Each year, Oklahoma is honored to participate in this forum as we discuss the impact and importance of UAS on the state, national, and global level. I am proud to say Oklahoma is nationally recognized as an industry leader in the research, development, test, and evaluation of unmanned aerial systems. Between 2014 and 2019, $44 million in contracts were awarded to Oklahoma companies and institutions in support of unmanned aerial systems. With this being said, an increasing number of UAS companies are flocking to Oklahoma. Since my time in office, we have seen companies like Kratos Defense, Skydweller, Martin Defense Group, and many more plant roots here in our state. Our highly skilled, abundantly available UAS workforce was the primary factor in these three companies deciding to locate in Oklahoma. Our three state research universities, Oklahoma State University, the University of Oklahoma, and Tulsa University, are setting themselves apart nationally in a UAS through degree programs, facilities, research, grants, and more, emphasizing UAS technology. In fact, OSU is the nation's first UAS graduate program offered at a research university. And since 2014, engineering graduates in Oklahoma have increased by over 86%. And thanks to the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, who is also nationally recognized for investing more into aerospace and aviation education than any other state in the U.S., businesses across the nation are taking note of the talent Oklahoma is producing in this field. Another critical factor UAS companies consider in relocating to Oklahoma is access to the state's key UAS assets. To name a few, Oklahoma has 3 major UAS flight test range totaling over 6,800 square miles, all hosting industrial parks ideally suited for UAS RDT&E and manufacturing. The FAA Mike Maroney Aeronautical Center is home to key UAS integration and policymakers. OSU's Unmanned Systems Research Institute assesses expertise throughout the university to combine cutting-edge product development with academic knowledge and resources. The National Severe Storms Laboratory in Norman, it collaborates with OU and OSU to characterize severe storms with UAS technology. And Oklahoma has a robust military presence, including Tinker Air Force Base, Vance Air Force Base, Altus Air Force Base, Fort Sill, and McAllister Army Ammunition Plant, and 7 National Guard assets. It is so exciting to see Oklahoma is increasingly being recognized as a fly-to state for advanced technology and manufacturing. My administration and our state leaders understand the future impact of the UAS industry. And we are committed to working with our companies, state agencies, and community partners to remain an industry leader. In 2018, the Oklahoma legislature created the Aerospace Commerce Economic Services Program. We call it ACES. It's a team of aerospace and economic development professionals focused specifically on growing the aerospace and defense industries, with the development of the UAS industry being one of their primary focuses. And finally, Oklahoma provides an extremely competitive business environment by offering a low cost of doing business paired with a high quality of life. We have been named the #1 lowest business tax burden by the Anderson Group in 2018, and we also tout the lowest energy prices in the entire country right here in Oklahoma. So thank you again for joining us as we dive into the future of UAS and how we can work together to move both this industry and our state forward. May God bless you and God continue to bless.
All right, well, thank you. Well, we appreciate that the governor was able to provide us with that welcome message. And again, we welcome everybody to the Tech Forum, and to a big shout out to our host city, Oklahoma City, and all of the partners throughout the country who supported the Tech Forum to make this happen. So we've got a wonderful lineup of speakers this morning, and I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker. We have Dr. Tomas Diaz de la Rubia. So hopefully I got that right.
Very good, Amanda. Fantastic. I'm impressed.
All right, great. So Dr. Diaz de la Rubia is a science and technology leader, strategist, and administrator with extensive experience in government, academia, and the private sector. Currently, Tomas is the Vice President for Research and Partnerships at the University of Oklahoma. In this capacity, Tomas, you lead OU's efforts to enhance the scale and scope of the university's research enterprise and to develop a new strategic framework for research to propel the university forward, particularly in the areas of national security, energy, and sustainability, and the life sciences. We spoke a little bit earlier, and you have just an incredible history and so much depth and knowledge that you bring to this role. So we're very excited to have you here, able to join us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's really a pleasure and an honor both to be here today, welcoming all of the participants to this UAS Tech Forum that, as Governor Stitt just indicated, is so important, not only to the state of Oklahoma, but really nationally and globally to all of us for so many different reasons. So again, thank you for inviting me to make a few opening remarks and introduce our first keynote speaker in a couple of minutes. So we were all, I'm sitting here in Norman, Oklahoma. I'm actually on campus at the University of Oklahoma this morning, about 20 miles away from the Innovation District in Oklahoma City, where we were all hoping to host you. But you know, given the reality in which we live today, this virtual format, I'm sure is going to work out really, really well. So, and in some sense, allow even more people to participate. So we're honored to be a sponsor of the Tech Forum, and looking forward to the proceedings over the next few days. You know, as a top-tier research university, we partner and collaborate with industry, with the federal government, with the state government, with other universities, to find innovative solutions to some of the world's global challenges. And really no challenge in front of us today, so many challenges in front of us, but one that really comes to the forefront and is a strategic focus for the university is the entire sector of aerospace, defense, and national security. As Governor Stitt indicated, that is vitally important to the state of Oklahoma. We have tremendous assets in the state around our military bases and the industry that lives around those military bases and contributes to the economy of the state. And we as a university feel that it's critically important for us to be an integral part of providing advanced technology, advanced science, advanced solutions for our warfighters who are there in the front lines of defending our nation and our allies. So as part of that, we have been focused strongly on UAV research as a salient component of our strategy for the future. And we're building on that research based on our decades-long expertise in atmospheric science and weather prediction. The University of Oklahoma in Norman ranks among the top 5 in the nation in atmospheric science. It is one of our strengths and our fortes, and we have been very, very strongly focused on bringing autonomous sensing and sampling via UAVs to the weather and storm prediction mission that, again, the governor was also referring to. We created back in 2016 the Center for Autonomous Sensing and Sampling, and that center has been developing very innovative, new, very creative new UAVs that are able to measure greenhouse gases and really measure the state of the atmosphere in the third dimension, going up from the typical way in which we measure atmospheric conditions to be able to better predict weather for all kinds of applications. So we're excited about that research. We're very excited about the work that we do with the National Severe Weather Storm, and it's critically important in our ability to really understand and better be able to predict major severe weather events like tornadoes, hurricanes, and others that cause such devastation and loss of life when they're not forecast appropriately. So we're very, very engaged in that with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, as well as with NASA developing and building instrumentation and new satellites to put up in geosynchronous orbit to measure, again, the atmosphere and be able to improve our ability to predict future weather as we go forward. So those are really some of the key efforts here at the university. We are delighted to be partnering with companies across the entire spectrum. For example, the governor mentioned Skydweller. We are building a very strong partnership with this company that just recently moved to the state of Oklahoma, made its headquarters in Oklahoma City. We are delighted and thrilled to be members of the Skydweller ecosystem and working with their CEO, the Chief Technology Officer, and the staff in the company to help them stand their new headquarters here in Oklahoma. So lots of exciting work ahead, and we're all really looking forward to what this forum is going to teach us about the current state of the art and where we're going to in the future. So nobody better to introduce that topic of the current state of affairs and the future directions in the field than our keynote speaker this morning, Brian Wynne. Brian is the president and CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, which is the world's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of unmanned systems and the partnering of corporations and professionals from more than 60 countries in that space. He's an influential industry thought leader who in 2017 was appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Transportation to a 3-year term on the Federal Aviation Administration, the FAA Management Advisory Council, a critically important role because it really provides counsel to the FAA in terms of regulatory matters when it comes to UAVs, UASs, and how the agency can overcome some of those regulatory constraints. We had an interesting conversation just before we went live about that. So we're all looking forward to hearing the remarks by Brian. And with that, I'll pass the microphone, the virtual microphone on to you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Good morning. My name is Brian Wynne. I'm the President and CEO of the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. AUVSI is the world's largest nonprofit organization dedicated exclusively to the advancement of unmanned systems and robotics, including unmanned aircraft systems. I appreciate the invitation to be here with you today. The UAS Tech Forum is a valuable opportunity to take inventory of where our industry is and to look toward future challenges and opportunities that are ripe for accelerated advancement. This year marks the 7th annual edition of this forum, and it is impressive to watch how the evolution of this event over those years tracks with the advancement of our industry as the fastest growing segment of aviation. While I would have preferred to welcome you all in person, a global pandemic had other plans for us. I am, however, glad that the UAS Cluster Initiative was able to pivot to an online forum and continue the event, as dialogue between stakeholders is critical to our industry continuing to move forward. Pilots know that skills are perishable. In many ways, so is information. So it is great to be here with you today to share information and participate in the conversations on moving the industry forward. So where do we find ourselves today? Just a few weeks ago, we passed the 4th anniversary of Part 107, which has allowed for widespread use of UAS around the country. Operators have been flocking to the technology and clearly demonstrated its utility and safety. And as of today, there are 72 active FAA Part 107 waivers in Oklahoma and 57 in Kansas, including a recently granted waiver to K-State Polytechnic to allow remote pilots to operate from an indoor command center when conducting beyond visual line of sight operations. Along with the other 4,000 plus active waivers nationwide, operators with these waivers are conducting critical missions, including unmanned flights at night, over people, beyond line of sight, and in other conditions regulated by Part 107. The waivers authorized so far demonstrate that operators are able to conduct innovative, expanded operations safely. Notably, about 87% of the waivers granted so far are to small businesses with fewer than 10 employees and annual revenues of less than $1 million. These small businesses are using drones for infrastructure inspections, real estate photography, crop surveys to improve irrigation, and much more. Additionally, first responders across the country have received about 20% of all waivers granted to organizations, demonstrating the growing interest in UAS for public safety applications. UAS are increasingly contributing to the greater good worldwide, supporting missions from disaster relief to search and rescue to humanitarian aid. With Part 107 waivers reaching a historic peak, and with demand even more urgent under the current COVID-19 situation, there is clear demand for advanced unmanned flight operations. At AUVSI, we are working closely with the FAA to ensure not only that waivers continue to be granted in a timely fashion, but as the remote ID rule is prepared for publication in the next few months, there is a plan in place to ensure a transition that allows the industry to evolve rapidly during the period of time when the rule is in its implementation phase. Earlier this year, the FAA's Drone Advisory Committee, which I am a member of, established a working group to work on recommendations on ways to streamline the waiver process. I chaired this working group, and we submitted substantive recommendations for the FAA on process, accountability, and transparency, which would significantly enhance the waiver process. AUVSI then stayed in regular communication with the FAA about process enhancements, advocating for much-needed changes to Part 107, which can also serve as a model for other processes, Part 135, Part 91, and 44807. I am pleased to report to you that the FAA is taking action on many of the DAC's recommendations. The agency is rolling out meaningful changes to the Part 107 waiver processes. They are also enhancing employee training for those involved in waiver review and committing to new measures to enhance accountability and transparency into the process. I commend the FAA for its commitment to working with the industry to augment its processes and learn from the previous years of work to inform how to improve going forward. This type of industry and government collaboration on Part 107 is a big step in the right direction. Okay, so by now you're probably thinking, that all sounds great, Brian, but how do we move beyond waivers and get to the permanent regulatory framework? First and foremost, it starts with safety. In 2014, AUVSI and the Academy of Model Aeronautics, alongside the FAA, developed the Know Before You Fly campaign to ensure that people have the information and guidance they need to safely and responsibly operate their UAS within the U.S. airspace. That campaign continues today and is expanding its reach globally with cooperation from international partners. In 2018, AUVSI developed its Trusted Operator Program, or TOP. This program, available to remote pilots and UAS training organizations, uses safety standards from the FAA and other regulatory bodies to certify the ability to operate safely and follow a comprehensive set of protocols. By providing a standard way to demonstrate UAS proficiency and safety, the TOP will help ensure the safe and sustainable advancement of the commercial UAS industry in the years to come. The use of UAS around airports is emblematic of the challenging world we live in. On the one hand, UAS are becoming vital tools for runway and even aircraft inspection. On the other, alleged UAS incursions around airports created disruptions and legitimate concerns about how to improve safety. That's why AUVSI partnered with the Airports Council International North America last year to form a Blue Ribbon Task Force on UAS mitigation at airports. The task force was co-chaired by former FAA Administrator Michael Huerta and former Los Angeles World Airport CEO Deborah Flint. The task force brought together a cross-section of stakeholders representing the airport, UAS, security, and manned aviation communities to refine practices and provide a policy framework to address this timely and critical issue. Last October, the task force issued its report with over 20 substantive recommendations. These include a recommendation that lawmakers extend critical, time-sensitive UAS interdiction authority to train state and local law enforcement agencies tasked with safeguarding airports and the immediate surrounding areas. To continue to move this industry forward, safety must always be the uncompromising foundation of our work. Another critical step forward for our industry is remote ID. As you know, in late December of last year, the FAA released its Notice of Proposed Rulemaking for remote identification of UAS. Establishing remote ID standards will increase the safety and security of the airspace by allowing authorities to identify and track UAS in real time. Remote ID standards also serve as the linchpin needed for future rulemaking that will pave the way for transformative uses of UAS with significant benefits for our economy and society. Remote ID is also critical to the development of a UAS traffic management system, or UTM, that works alongside our existing air traffic control system for manned aircraft. At a recent virtual symposium co-hosted by the FAA and AUVSI, the FAA Administrator Steve Dixon made it clear that the final remote ID rule will be forthcoming by December of this year. We look forward to seeing the final remote ID rule released by the FAA, which will be a major step forward enabling expanded operations and supporting the safety of our airspace for all aircraft, both manned and unmanned. At that same symposium, we heard from FAA leadership on the future of the FAA's Integration Pilot Program. With two lead participants within the UAS Cluster Initiative, the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma and the Kansas Department of Transportation, this is obviously an issue of great importance. The FAA made it clear that the IPP program, as required by law, is ending in its current iteration. However, the IPP will continue in a new manner going forward. What this looks like is still being worked out, but we are confident that the tremendous lessons learned and the valuable data obtained from the IPP will continue to inform the future integration of UAS and provide a platform of success on which the entire industry can build on. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to talk about our industry's important role in the COVID-19 pandemic. Just how well is our industry responding to this unprecedented challenge? At a time when human-to-human contact can be a threat to public health, key decision makers worldwide are seeing the value of UAS in improving supply chain resiliency and offering a variety of socially distanced services. This presents unprecedented opportunities for our industry to not only innovate new technologies in response to the challenges presented by COVID-19, but also to drive policy changes that will fully integrate UAS into supply chains. The solutions we are providing are not all entirely new, but they are novel. No other industry has the same capability to meet current needs like the unmanned industry. AUVSI is more dedicated than ever to advancing our industry by highlighting the best uses of UAS to meet the needs posed by COVID-19. And we want to capitalize on this time to help enhance public perception of UAS. I encourage you to check out our recently launched web series of videos, Assuring Autonomy, on the AUVSI website. The first 5 videos profile UAS companies using their technology to solve new challenges posed by the pandemic. We know that if we can safely utilize UAS to solve new pandemic-related problems, as our industry is now doing across the country, it will go a long way toward solving some of these problems into the future. At this point, you're probably asking yourself another question. When is this guy going to stop talking? So as I conclude, I'll reemphasize the future of the UAS industry is very promising, and the impact of our innovation on the world's economy, lifestyle, and society is transformative. Thank you all for doing what you're doing to drive important innovations, even in the face of the current challenges. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Brian. And thank you for being here with us live to field some questions from our attendees. So we really appreciate that. You said so many good things in your presentation. I know the cluster initiative was also very focused on how drone companies were responding to the COVID pandemic. And we got to talk with a few companies who were doing some really innovative things. And we're out there really helping with the efforts, and we'll continue to do so. I'm sure we'll continue to see more and more innovations and changes as companies address this serious issue. So just a reminder for everybody, if you have questions for Brian, please type it into the chat box, and we'll go through the questions and answer any that come up. But another thing that you mentioned in your presentation was the IPP. So this is the Integrated Pilot Program by FAA. This has been a very, by all means, successful program. As you mentioned, there are 2 IPPs in the region that we support, one in Kansas and one in Oklahoma. So we're very excited about that. And we're going to have a session tomorrow talking a little bit about what's next for IPP. As that program wraps up, what's next? But what are you hearing from your members about takeaways from the IPP? Where do you see it going at the close of this program? And what are some of the key takeaways that you've heard about?
Well, first, again, thank you, Amanda, for inviting me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I almost regret that I had to tape that speech, but there was an awful lot to convey, and I didn't want to leave anything out. So, but frankly, it's not the level of energy that I like to bring to a presentation, and it's hard to do that. We're all trying to figure out the advantages and the disadvantage. The disadvantage of giving speeches is there's no audience. Right there to capture some energy from. But I know you've got a great following out there, and I know this event's been going on quite a long time and adding a tremendous amount of value. And as Governor Stitt pointed out, Oklahoma has in fact been leading, and Kansas has been has just been a stalwart in aviation for a long, long time. The IPP, to your question, Amanda, has been, it's been a real eye-opener from many, many perspectives, I think. And for me personally, the thing that I have been starting to appreciate more and more is the importance of the IPP. Well, I mean, we talk about gathering data, but for the UAS integration office to gather data is one thing, but to get beyond Part 107, which is what the IPP is really focusing on, what we really need is we need a lot of collaboration from many other parts of the FAA. So we saw this at an event that I mentioned in my speech that we did with the FAA pretty recently, where we had Earl Lawrence, the previous head of the UAS Integration Office, who now runs aircraft certification, as well as a gentleman from Flight Standards, talking to Jay Merkel, who currently runs the UAS Integration Office, of course. And the only person missing from that discussion, from my point of view, was there should have been a representative from the Air Traffic Organization, because to get to where we need to be, the Holy Grail, and so much of the flying that's been done during the IPP is beyond visual line of sight. And that involves aircraft certification. It involves the training of the pilot itself, so flight standards, and it involves the use of the airspace, increasingly UTM and so forth. And a lot of the work that's been done at Choctaw Nation and in the Kansas IPP has really focused on those things. How do you get the aircraft either waivered or certificated or certified, and how do you make sure that the pilots and their standards are up to speed? These are all questions that need to be answered in a regulatory framework, not just on an instant by instance basis, which is essentially what we're left with Part 107 waivers. The IPP has done the seminal work that's needed for the next leg of regulation, which is coming very, very soon. We're already seeing that beyond visual line of sight through delivery of packages and so forth, starting to spin up. How do we get a regulatory framework around that so it's vastly more predictable and not just operation by operation?
I appreciate that. So you mentioned a lot of things in there that we'll be talking about over the next 2 days. You mentioned UTM. We've got some breakouts to chat about that. And also, some of the other regulatory issues. And we have Joe Mora with FAA, who's going to be addressing our attendees tomorrow morning for the plenary. So
Perfect.
appreciate that. Yeah. So thank you for mentioning those. So we do have a question from Gustavo. He is wondering what impacts, this is another session that we're going to be addressing, is remote ID. There's no way that we can't talk about UAS and talk about remote ID. So what impacts of remote ID proposal do you foresee on custom platform development? He's specifically asking about weather research, because I suspect he's affiliated with OU and OSU. But what do you foresee on platform development with the remote ID proposal?
Well, my firm desire and hope is that that the remote ID rule that comes out hopefully in December, and all future regulation is really performance based, which would allow for us to set out, this is what's required in order to be in compliance with regulation, but allows industry to continue to design platforms in ways that will continue to evolve as technology evolves. So it's, and let's face it, that's a big departure from the way we've done aviation over the years, where it's been very prescriptive. I don't think there's a lot of debate about that concept in principle, that we want to allow. We can't future-proof this industry or technology in general. So how do we design performance-based rules that allow for the industry and the technology to continue to evolve? but we'll see how they actually implement when it comes to remote ID. It's really difficult to answer Gustavo's question, which is a really good one. But this is my firm hope is that they will have heard a lot of us in industry saying, please allow us to continue to evolve this technology. Don't be prescriptive in your approach. Tell us what it is that you need. And we know we need remote identification, just like we know we need a lot of different things and technologies proven out. But we don't need that to be regulated in such a way that it restricts the evolution of the technology and the innovation that we know is continuing to move forward.
Thank you. So we have time for about one more question, and I'm going to take this question from actually a company that's going to be participating in our pitch presentations, which are coming up next. So they have a amazing wildlife control and a fire suppression UAS technology that they're working on. But their question is more specific to AUVSI. They're in the prototype development phase. How early should they engage AUVSI or AUVSI recommended entities to address waiver requirements and systems that will be needed within their UAS? What's a good time for a company to kind of start engaging some of your members or engage AUVSI?
Well, my sense is sooner is better than later. When it comes to waivers, this is, again, we're in a process right now, and I talked about it a little bit, where there are many different entities within the FAA that come together to decide on the waivers, and we've been trying to get them to do that in a much more consistent way. But once again, when there's a prototype, I think maybe if it's in the ugly prototype stage, that would be a good time to come forward and say, here's what we're doing. Inside of the FAA, I keep hearing this, this leaning in toward, we want to be almost doing regulation in real time. Well, of course, that's not very practical, but at the same time, we recognize that if we do have performance-based regulations, then it can be easier for folks to demonstrate, this is how we are, this is our latest mousetrap. This is how it can achieve the kinds of performance that you need. And the sooner you're taking a collaborative approach with other partners and with the regulators to get that done, I think the faster you're going to get to the goal.
Sorry, I apologize. I said that was the last question, but there's actually one here I would love for you to answer.
Okay.
Great questions from Woody. He said, which entity leads in standards development, FAA or ASTM? This is something we're also going to be talking about a little later in our agenda. What's your take on that?
Well, ASTM is a fantastic organization. They did yeoman's work on the remote ID standard, and I think the advantage to international standards is there's a process there for industry to collaborate and probably be a little bit more forward-looking because you've got the experts directly involved. The regulators, by design, are in many instances catching up with that. I have been encouraging the FAA to utilize international standards, and ASTM is plugged into the international standards network, of course, to the greatest extent possible, because that's the quickest way to get consensus among industry players on how to get things done. But the FAA is still a regulator, so when it's all said and done, there's a role, an interactive and a collaborative role, I think, that needs to be played there between industry, the voluntary standards process, and what the regulators are actually calling for in order to fly in the airspace.
Great, thank you. So a lot of the topics that we discussed this morning we'll dive deeper into over the next 2 days. Really appreciate you being here with us, Brian, and fielding some of these questions and sharing, sort of the landscape of what UAS looks like today, what's happening, and what it's gonna look like in the next couple of years. Also want to thank Dr. Tomas Diaz de la Rubia. He is with the University of Oklahoma. They are a sponsor of the Tech Forum, so I encourage you to go and visit their booth and learn more about some of their programs and what they're working on. And also want to thank Governor Stitt for his wonderful welcome. So we welcome you all to the Tech Forum. We're going to take a quick break, and then coming up next are the pitch presentations. So Brian, this is a chance to see some of the emerging technologies that one of them that we mentioned here this morning, and learn a little bit more about what's going on out there in the world of technology development around UAS. So it's always a very exciting session, and I'm looking forward to it. But again, we want to thank you so much for your time and really appreciate all that you were able to share with us today.
My great pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. This concludes our plenary and our kickoff. We'll take a quick break and then we'll reconvene for the pitch presentations. So we'll see you all back here in a little bit. Thank you.